Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Zero to Empire podcast. I have Michelle Courtney Berry, and she is actually the founder of Courtney Consulting. So she's here to tell her about her story and her experiences through the making her own small business, and actually what inspired you to start the Courtney Consulting business model.
Uh, Thanks, Sam. I mean, it all happened through serendipity, I guess. I mean, I already had a background in doing reporting, and I covered the White House and Capitol Hill, and so I had a background in speaking, right? And then I was going to Cornell for organizational and risk communication, and I ended up, it was like the story is based on, like, I guess I call it like the leaky roof pesticides in Meryl Streep. So how that's all related is I got sent to an agricultural economics conference and teaching farmers how to better communicate to the media. And while I was there a lot of the people on the panel in Washington were kind of blaming the media for like the pesticide stories getting out, and like Meryl Streep had gone on the air, and I think she said something like, "Don't eat these apples out of your lunchbox; they're covered with pesticides." And the apple industry toppled. This is like in the '90s, and so what I did was I was supposed to be there just recruiting speakers to Cornell. But what I did is I stood up and I said, well, you all can complain about the media, or you can learn how to speak in sound bites, not use scientific jargon. And you could actually use the studies on risk communication about how much the public is willing to tolerate about risk. And so there was like a hushed silence. They're like, thank you, recognizing Michelle Bay from Cornell. I was a grad student at the time. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to go back to my department. And they're going to be like, what are you doing? Your job was to recruit speakers. And what happened was the head of Michigan's Department of Agriculture came up to me and he said, if Michigan State and University of Michigan aren't doing this research, because I can't step on their toes, we're going to fly you out to be a speaker on a panel about risk communication. And like, I was such a geek at the time. They were like, Peter Sandman will be there. And that was like Peter Gabriel to some people. I was like, Peter Sandman, because I'm a nerd. And so I get back to my department and they're like, what did you do when you went to Washington? And I was like, oh my God, I was just supposed to recruit speakers. They're like, no, no, no. MDA called and they want you to be on the panel with Peter Salmon. And so that's really what launched me into speaking and training business, was just because this professor had a leaky roof and his wife said, if you don't fix the roof, we're getting a divorce. And I don't know if she was kidding. He sent me in his place to the conference. I happened to stand up and talk about like the power of celebrity with Meryl Streep, and having to talk about like learning to talk in sound bites. And actually, when I got back and I got called to that conference and spoke at it, then I had stuff for a speaker reel. And then suddenly I was like, well, what if I helped other people do speaking and training and coaching around how to tell their story? So that's how I started my business, like right when I was graduating Cornell in the early '90s. And so that's how that happened. And then I opened a full service marketing firm. But every time I went to talk to people about their website or their branding, they talked to me about their stress. And finally, I was like, maybe my calling is actually to help people with their stress. And so that's how I ended up adding stress management to. So at one point, I had like a marketing firm that also did stress management. People are like, if you're doing branding, we don't understand your brand. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I do either. And that's how it started. Yeah, and I've had that business since then. So I branched out from speaking, training, to and marketing to just helping people manage stress and change. And I particularly started focusing on helping other business owners deal with the same issues that I was facing all the time.
Yeah, that's one inspirational story. And I'm glad to have you be a part of the podcast. And so, how do you actually define good stress versus bad stress, and why is it important for success?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're all going to face stress, right? So, when we look at kind of good stress, that's the chemical we get from that is called eustress. And eustress is a great stress hormone that helps us like finish a paper or complete a project or finish a marathon or do a difficult task. So we get bursts of that energy, and that hormone is great for us because it helps us drive ourselves to, reaching really incredible heights, right? The bad stress is cortisol that dumps itself into our system, and that is from constant adrenaline, constant overwork, constant anxiety. And what happens with that stress is it builds up to such an extent that we can have serious we can have heart risk, we have risk for cancer. We lower our immunity the more we stay in hypervigilance. So bad stress, in which we are snapping at people or not being able to kind of focus, or burning ourselves out by staying up all night and then repeating it over and over again. And so I help people distinguish between the good levels of stress that they're having that help them complete a project or a task, and then the bad levels of stress, which are really depleting their energy, depleting their resources, and it's going to lead them to burnout. So I try to help people distinguish that, know which one to tap into and which one to back away from.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad because there's definitely good stress and bad stress. One that incentivizes you and one that just keeps you healthy for sure.
Yeah.
And so, what are some practical strategies you recommend for maximizing peak performance without burning out?
Well, that's a hard one, right? Because I think it's a double-edged sword because for any of us who are driving our own businesses or, entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, we get rewarded for actually delivering on time or exceptionally. I always say I deliver at 110%, but what I've lost in that is often sleep or peace, or I've elevated levels of cortisol that I don't need. So obviously the number one thing I'm going to tell you as a stress reduction expert is like to lower your stress, but to do it by figuring out which part of this calculation you're going to be able to do. Because if we study what comes in the mail to us, what we see on social media, we have conflicting strategies, we have conflicting health information. And so what I've often found is that even if people I think people have told us that we need less sleep because it means we're smarter, and actually, I think that's a lie. It's definitely something that was told to sleep deprived people to make us feel better about ourselves, but actually, you do need sleep, and so, 7 to 9 hours of sleep is recommended. A lot of us don't get that. So the issue is to for peak performance is to understand that you have to just decide like one night you're going to lose sleep because you're on a deadline or you owe something to a client and you're not getting rest. That's fine. Just don't do it the next night. So it's really like keeping your environment based on sleep. So it's not having a lot of devices on. It's literally having a sleep hygiene of shutting down. Like I don't want to do anything. I live in Eastern time. 10:30 at night, I'm done. Don't ask me anything more complicated. I used to pride myself that I got my best thinking at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. But as I've aged, it actually doesn't work for me. So it's that I've learned that after 10:30 at night, I don't want to discuss serious issues and I'm not going to be on devices. And so I shut down, I power down, and then I'm asleep within an hour of that. The other thing is that you have to take breaks away from toxicity. There's so many toxic people, elements, difficult clients, difficult relationships that we're in. So kind of I have people do an inventory of the toxicity in their lives, right? And I have them look at the stress you can control and the stress you can't. And if you have people on the list of what you can control, you're going to be really stressed out because you can't control anything but your own behaviors, your own hygiene, your own wellness, your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own workout plan. So I try to have people stay in their lane. Like how we can get peak performance is recognizing the stuff we should take in, the stuff we shouldn't pay attention to. I tell people to get off social for periods of times a day. I tell them not to attend the news cycle constantly. And then one of the things I want you to do is to think about fueling your mind and your body. And so when we ask people how they're doing, what they often answer is they answer about their physical self. Like, oh, I've worked out today, or oh, I don't feel like lifting today. And I say, well, okay, well, what's your mind doing? So making that disconnect between mind and body, we need to connect again. And so what happens is if people want to structure their day for success, is start mindfully. I always start by meditating. You're not going to always perfectly hydrate, but I like have hacks. Like this is how much water I need to drink between this time and this time. So I ask people to hydrate, I ask them to sleep, and I ask them to be kind to themselves. But overall, I think that you get to maximize your success by actually figuring out when your sweet spot is. When do you work best and when do you need to take breaks? And I think you have to reclaim your right to rest. And also, if you don't set clear boundaries, everybody's going to run right over you. So it's really true. We want to know, we want our clients to know we're available. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we think we need to be on call 24/7, 365. If you do that, a client's going to expect to reach you any time of day, any time of night. And then you're going to be burnt out.
Yeah, it makes sense. Definitely overworking yourself and just trying to people please, honestly. So that's a common issue, especially for high achievers. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, for a lot of us, we're successful in what we're doing because we have been such high achievers, right? And so, um, basically, it's rooted, I think, for me. I don't want to speak for others, but a lot of the studies do say it's rooted in our childhood, right? So it's rooted in our upbringing. So people pleasing tendencies happen in early life, and one of the things that even though sometimes My son, who's Gen Z, will drive me a little crazy because he's like, well, I don't have to listen to the authority figures. It's like, well, the other generations did, you know. So if you kind of think generationally, I'm Gen X. A lot of us were we had to report to people who were war generation and boomers, right? And so they set the tone, and they were like authority figures like parents. And so a lot of that achievement was pleasing teachers, you know, significant others, parents. And I think that at least when I grew up, love was fairly conditional. It was based on like how well you behaved and how well you did in school. And so I didn't get unconditional love from parents. I got conditional love, and I also had to make my own money. And I've been working since I was like 12 in different jobs. Like nothing was handed to me. And so I think that set this huge standard that you had to go had to be high performing all the time. And I think between that and you add in societal and cultural influences, they send the message of perfectionism. And I think that that kind of perfectionism and it ties into why we feel so driven and why we tend to worry about the opinions of others. So it's a double-edged sword because if you don't please certain people, they're not going to recommend you for jobs. They're not going to, you know, give you that word of mouth that gets the next client. They're not going to, you know, be loyal to your brand. So I think we get mixed messages about how pleasing we need to be for that next client, for that next contract. And so kind of in hooking some of that, like you have to think about, well, if we are conditioned to be pleasing, that also leads to thinking everybody needs to like us. And I think that that is what I'm also a doctoral student in leadership, kind of seeing that a lot of our leaders aren't performing at the levels that we really need them to perform because they are caught up in the cycle too of like being either everybody liking them or them believing that they have to be so disagreeable and unlikable for people to follow them, the kind of Machiavellian, like psychopathic kind of tendencies. So I think we get a lot of messaging that tells us that everyone has to like us. And I think we don't learn till later that actually disagreement could be the strongest form of approval that we get from others, because if when people trust us enough and feel like we can handle conflict well enough to disagree with us, they actually can help us see things in a different light. Disagreement doesn't mean people aren't supporting you, but we have been conditioned that everyone must agree with us and like us, and we have to be popular somehow to be successful. And actually, some of those leaders who lean on popularity and likability are actually some of our weakest leaders, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I believe like Mark Zuckerberg wasn't that popular when he built Facebook, and
No,
look how it is today.
no, no, I don't think he's worried about popularity.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when it comes to your new course we were talking about before this, radical courage, how does that actually help people break free from the people pleasing habits?
Yeah, I mean, I know that we talked about it being so high, that people pleasing among high achievers. And so I'm beta testing this course now with a lot of my high achieving CEO clients. And it's really helping people foster the self awareness and the assertiveness that they need to know that you can't please everybody all the time, right? So, one of the things that I help people do is figure out how can you prioritize finding your authentic voice. And your authentic voice and your authentic leadership is not going to always resonate with everyone. And so sometimes I try to tell people to have this radical courage is that I'm helping people find out who are your people, right? Your people will have you regardless. They don't have to like everything you do. And so I'm trying to empower individuals in their leadership to maintain a level of authenticity that feels safe for them. Because in a lot of ways, when you're people pleasing, you're often passive aggressive, you're often not honest about how you really feel about something because you've been taught that these people pleasing habits are actually going to get you this kind of happiness. And we're seeing a disconnect. People aren't happier by doing tons of people pleasing. And I guess people pleasing has gotten, I don't know if we're on the DSM 4 or 5 with the psychological manual that therapists use. But I actually think that they've been arguing that people pleasing is actually a diagnosable condition in DSM 5 now. So it's actually a mental health disorder. So I don't treat that part, but I do work with people on struggling with boundary setting, fearing negative appraisal, unhinging from childhood messaging about perfectionism. And so we take it one step at a time. And one of the biggest things in the course is overcoming naysayers, and not just what other people are saying, but what you say to yourself. What are those old messages that you've told yourself about your limits, or what are your limiting beliefs about yourself? So, that's really funny. I keep putting my glasses off and on because we had early training that like people will believe your messaging more if you're wearing glasses. So I'll be toggling between my glasses and not wearing them because actually when I used to do every TV before I actually needed reading glasses, I had fake glasses every time I did a live television interview because the messaging I had was that people who wear glasses are smarter. See,
That's
all these
so.
messages, all these weird messages, Sam.
Uh, that's interesting. Honestly, I mean, it's probably because of the look of it being like a doctor. I guess I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
really sure,
yeah.
but that's interesting. Can you actually share a story of a coaching client that transformation stood out to you?
Yeah. I'm working with this one client who transitioned from owning his own company to working with somebody else, and then now has his own business again. And one of the things that we really started working on is he had difficulty with he had a lot of people pleasing tendencies. He had difficulty with kind of setting his own boundaries and prioritizing his needs, and really wanted to figure out how to maximize his money. And one of the things that was really successful for him is that he learned the key connection between stress, time, and your bottom line. Like you're going to make more money when you're less stressed and when you actually declare your own space. So he started claiming his right to kind of rest, to set boundaries with everyone in his life. And you'll often find that if people have blurred boundaries in their business, it's not just in their business, they have it in their personal lives, they have it in their academic work. So helping somebody really figure out who they are actually increases their competitive advantage in their business, because you can't I think we often, when we're new to what we're doing, we actually believe we're supposed to attract everyone to us, like everybody's our client, and actually that's not how you run a business, right? Like, so everybody's not for you. Everybody's not going to order what is on your menu. That's fine, because you should know, like, it used to take me hours to help clients. Like, one success for this client is I told him, you get good with your elevator speech, I'll get good with mine. Because people would stop me and be like, what do you do? And like an hour later, I'm still talking to them. And I'm like, you have to be able to say. So I was like, so if my elevator pitch right is, I help visionary leaders like you press reset so you can prioritize, focus, and truly enjoy your hard earned success. And if I'm saying I work in these three industries, well, if you're not in that industry and you're not a visionary leader and you're not trying to balance, being happy, then I'm not the coach for you. I'm not the speaker for you. And so I learned that I'm not for everybody, and everybody's not for me. And so I helped this client. I think he doubled revenue just by taking less time at work. Right. So that's where you prove the opposite, which is actually when he was working less in his business and more on his health, he made more money.
Wow, that's very impressive, and I'm glad that he was able to do that and grow his
Me
business.
too, and
That's
it's a
awesome.
good testimonial. I have
Uh,
testimonials on my website, and I work hard for those because I'm not satisfied unless my clients are seeing success. And there's some people I aren't coachable. I've learned the hard way, like I can't take on non-coachable clients. Like if you're not interested in what I have to bring to the table, you're not the right client for me. Good luck.
yeah, you definitely got to be able to be coachable in order to grow,
Yeah.
and it just comes out of personal traits and everything.
Yeah.
So you also have a second course that you're launching soon, and that's called the Workplace Toxicity. Can you go over that a little bit?
Oh, sure. I'm really focused on that in my dissertation, and I'm working at LSUS online for my doctorate. And one of the things I'm really interested in is the cost. Just like I'm help people put a cost to stress, I want people to put a cost to toxicity. So one of the things we learned in the course is, what is the cost besides the human cost of working with bad leaders or in toxic environments? It's just the economic cost. And sometimes that's a bigger sell for businesses than when I'm like, let's make sure everyone's feeling good. They're like, okay, what's that going to cost us? So I talk about, what does it cost us when people are feeling badly? So we have something like, it's like, was 260 billion for the US, and I think it's now 375 billion dollars of cost for a toxic workplace, because that includes unresolved conflict or conflict where people don't come in and are calling out. It includes, absenteeism and presenteeism. And so the cost for toxicity internationally is $1 trillion. So first I have people look at what is the economic cost of toxicity at work. And then we educate about, well, how did we get there? So if there's societal elements that are toxic, there's going to be workplaces that are toxic. So we shouldn't be surprised that we have toxic workplaces. And we have the majority of the world deals with some toxicity, right, at work. But if we peel this onion back, what we recognize is that we have a lot of managers who don't have managerial training, right? So they've just gotten promoted into their position, but they don't really know how to manage people or difficult situations. So what I want to do is help people understand how we got here. So if 70% of managers don't know how to manage, they're going to make mistakes. And if we actually keep idolizing leaders, like we actually think leaders are going to solve all these problems, they're just human beings. So everybody, just having a title leader doesn't make you a leader, right? So I have then in the course, I have people look at what are the type, and it's also in my research, what are the type of leaders most likely to not be toxic or interrupt a toxic workplace. So I don't want people who write a tell-all book after they've left a toxic workplace. I want them to change it while they're in it. And so what we often find is that I help people figure out what are the best leaders to work for. And if you're not working for them, what are the top employee coping mechanisms that you need? Because people will be like, oh, just quit. Everybody can't quit their job. So, like, if you can't quit? So, I help you in the course know when you need to leave and give you the tools and resources on how to leave and how to leave in ways that don't burn you, right? But I also want people to know what to do if they're stuck there. And I'm a survivor of multiple toxic workplaces. And even having a toxic workplace background, certification in employee stress, critical incident stress debriefing, stress reduction training, being a Reiki master, a mindfulness meditation teacher, I went back to work at a workplace that was toxic. They asked me to come in and help them fix it. They admitted they were toxic. They said they were toxic. I still got sick working there. And I was in the C suite, right? I still got sick working there. I got so sick that I was a stroke risk, and I was pre diabetic. And I started emotionally eating again, a pattern that I thought I had broken. And literally, I worked there during COVID, so I helped them with their COVID policies. I was advising like senior team, I was training people. I was like, I will save everybody. I will help everybody. So I started snacking again. I stopped sleeping. I drank more wine than I needed to. I literally tell you, Sam, I literally was so sick and I had all that training. So I thought, what do people do without that training? And I talk about this in the course, like, how did I get sick even though I had the tools, right? And so it's a very insidious thing that can happen. It's not that everybody's just evil. It's often well-meaning people, many people pleasers, many egomaniacs who actually don't know how to lead, who are demoralizing and harming people at lower levels who are making way less than them. It's a lot of people at lower levels using a lot of passive aggressiveness, and that's a negative employee coping strategy of how to survive. And so I was able to look at the system. And since I didn't sign an NDA, I was like, I don't write about this place as a case study. But I literally had to reverse all of my negative blood scores and lose 70 pounds so that I could be healthy again.
Wow, that's one incredible story. And I'm glad you're able to get through that. And it's good to have that personal vulnerability with your clients as well, so that they understand that it's like you're not perfect and that everyone's human,
No,
and that you
perfect.
could just, yeah. And people have their own problems. Like you just have to get through it and just keep on going. So, what kind of advice would you give to other small business owners?
Hmm. Um, I think just learning from our mistakes is so critical, and not being afraid to share them. Like you just pointed out, like being vulnerable with your story. I used to believe this myth that I had to put on an impervious brand. I had to only tell the best stories. I had to hide the worst case stories. I had to be inauthentic, right? I mean, I was so hypocritical at one point in time that I gave a talk on the importance of sleep and I hadn't slept the night before. So I was like, I think the most important advice I would give is get out of your own way with hypocrisy. Be stand in your truth, be willing to tell your story. Like even like I just shared, like with all that experience, I still got sick, but it empowered me to say, now I want to get a doctorate in this field so that I can help more people. So um, understand that every lesson has a lesson. You don't know what you don't know. You have to surround yourself not with sycophants. You got to surround. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but you got no yes people. You got to be careful of groupthink. You need to surround yourself with people who are going to tell you about your blind spots because you don't know what you don't know. So I think you build a team of people that you trust in your inner circle who advise you and they tell you when you're slipping up. I definitely think, well, I'm always going to lead with a wellness strategy. I believe that your wealth is tied to your wellness. And I also believe that um, you, your purpose driven people, right? So don't lose sight of the fact that there are going to be days that you won't perform at peak. There are going to be times of great disappointment and discouragement. Like, what lessons can we get out of that? Like, because we're not, we're risky people, right? We're entrepreneurs. Like, we're small business owners. Like, we know that when it hits the fan, it's going to hit us. So it's like we get overtaxed, or both financially and emotionally. Like, what good things have we done? So I think another good piece of advice for business owners is look at all the difference in the impact that you're making. And it's not that you have to rest on your laurels, but I always feel like we're always chasing the next big thing, or going after the next thing. Like, what if we could reward ourselves with rest? What if we could reward ourselves with grace? I think I've learned the hard way that um, the stories that I most remember about running my business are the people I helped and the healing I got from that. And then I did meet some famous people along the way, but their humility was so shocking to me. Like, I've met international icons and I thought they'd be like, woohoo. And they were like the most down to earth people that I ever met in my life. So I was really graced by that lesson.
Oh, 100%. And I appreciate all your insight and your experiences on this podcast. Where can they reach out to you if they would like to do some business with you?
Oh, I'd love for people just to hit me up at my website. It's Michelle with two L's, Courtney Berry, CourtneyBerry.com. And if that's too long to remember, people just go to bit.ly/MCB help and find me on Calendly.
Awesome. Yeah, go check her out. Maybe also go see her resources, even book a call with her. And yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast. And for everyone listening in or watching in, I'll see everyone on the next episode of Zero to Empire.
Thank you so much, Sam.